So we're going to start off with doing two circle shapes. Don't worry about them being perfect. Those are going to be our irises. These need to dry. So we're going to start with those first. So by the time we're done, they can dry. You guys can pick any colors you want. I'm going to pick violet. And I'm going to pick like a red color. So I'm going to mix my color really fast. And I'm trying to keep all my tutorials consistent today. I'm going to wipe off my brush. Make sure your brush is always being cleaned. And then do not leave the brushes in the water. It ruins the handles. Okay, and then I'm going to take this reddish color that I have. So we're going to do some very practical watercolor exercises today, and we're going to do some that are just basic foundations or fundamentals. Okay, so the practical ones we're going to do is like if I was doing the eye, how would I do this? So dirty water, I only use the color that I'm going to use. So I'll take a little bit of that color and I'll just water it down till I get dirty water. And the reason I want that is because I want to see where I'm putting water down. And if I have too much water like I do right here, I'm just going to wipe my brush off and then just go back over it, and my brush will act like a sponge. Okay, and I can get rid of this excess water that's on there. What I want to do next is I'm going to take my paint and I'm just going to drop it in. And this will give me a nice flat color to work with. I don't want to go dark because I'm going to build up in my values. But this is a wet on wet technique, and we'll get a little bit more into that in a minute. But this will give me a mostly flat color. Pros and cons. Watercolor, it's really hard to get a flat color. You can do it in small areas using the wet on wet technique. But texture is part of the trait of watercolor. So like I couldn't do a solid background flat. It would have a bunch of different textures from where the watercolor dried in different spots. But small areas you can get away with it. So again, I put down my dirty water. I'm using that red color and I'm getting rid of the excess paint or water. And then I'm going to drop in my color. And the color will only go where water's at. And you guys really want to follow along and stay on track because we need this to dry. And I'm going to do the same thing to my iris and this eye. Again, I'm going to put a little bit of water down. And if anybody needs help, you can call me after I do this. And I'll come around to you. Okay, and I'm going to drop my color in. So generally, my wet on wet is super light. But I want the camera to be able to pick it up. And again, we're not looking for things to be perfect. This is just how do we do things. We're going to come back to this eye in a minute. I need that to dry a bit so it doesn't bleed everywhere. So I'll let you guys catch up. And then for those people who have caught up, we're going to draw like 3 little rectangular boxes down here. We don't want them to be too big. Yeah. Thank you. So we don't want these rectangles to be too big. Just enough to where you guys can get the technique. And we're working with wet on wet. And what that means is we put a coat of water down, but we want to color that water so we can see what we're doing. That's why I call it dirty water. And then we apply the watercolor, which is also wet on top of that. That's why it's called wet on wet. And that really just helps us get a nice smooth transition. So I don't care what color you pick. I think I'm going to use that lighter color again, that reddish color. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to put, and this is more or less what my dirty water looks like. So I don't know if the camera is going to pick it up very well. But it's just enough to where I can see it. And what I'm going to do is take my paint and I'm just going to load it in here. And what you're doing is, if you don't do this, it's called dry brush. And what happens is if you go into a dry watercolor paper, the paint will just absorb. It will not flow. And when you try doing something, you'll see your brush strokes and you'll see streaks. So the only way to avoid that is to use the wet on wet technique. And that'll give us a nice flat color. The next one we're going to do a gradient. So I want to be very light with this. I'm going to clean my brush off a little bit more. I'm going to bring this water down. And I want to make sure I pick up all the excess. Okay. So I'm only going to put the color in at the top. I'm going to clean off my brush and I'm going to pull it. I'm going to clean off my brush again in water, dab it on my towel, and then I'm going to pull again. Okay, and I'm going to go back up top a little bit and add a little bit more color up here. But again, I'll clean off my brush, pull, clean off my brush, and this is how you get a nice little gradient. Gradients are good for when you want to exit a shadow and not leave a harsh line. We're going to be doing that with the eye. So you really want to get the gradient down. You want to get used to cleaning your brush off, getting excess water off, and then dragging and pulling. Because we're going to use that technique for shadows. And in the next one, I'm going to do 2 gradients. So I'm going to have one going from the bottom up and the one from the top down, and I'm going to use 2 different colors. When we do this, we're only going to use analogous colors. Okay, so those are colors that are side by side. So violet and red are analogous. Red, violet, and blue are analogous, meaning they're harmonious. If you use colors that are opposites, you're going to get browns. Okay, so I'm going to start with just by putting a coat of water down. I'm going to go in and I'm going to grab some of that red. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to bring it down. I'm going to wipe my brush off. I'm going to pull this down a bit. I'm going to clean my brush. And then I'm going to go into that violet. And I'm going to do that opposite. So I'm going to start down here. I'm going to clean the excess off of my violet and I'm going to pull up. If you don't like pulling up or pushing up, you can just rotate your paper. And now I'm going to get a gradient. You can also shuffle the paper in the direction of your gradient, and gravity will kind of help blend that. When this starts to dry, I'll lift it up so you guys can see. But again, you can just see, like, you can use gravity to really help out with that. Okay, so I'm going to go back up to the eye. And I want to use a light version of this violet that I have. And what I'm going to start doing is laying in my shadows. So again, you just add water to watercolor. I'll draw in some of my shapes. And I just want to start indicating where these shadows are going to go. And I'm going to use that same technique we did with the gradient. I'm going to clean off my brush. And I'm going to pull. So I'll clean off my brush and I'm going to pull this out. Just like what we were doing when we were drawing with the pencil, except now we're using watercolor. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to add the shadow on this side. And again, watercolor is all about layering. And if you put too much in one area, okay, what you can do is you can take your paper towel or a tissue paper and you can lift. So I don't want white, but I do know where my shadows are now, and I do know where I'm going to darken my values. I'm going to add a little bit of a shadow to the eyeball. And this is kind of where you have to, this is why I want you guys to have your pencil drawing. I want you guys to have an idea of where things go that you can look at, and you can start adding those in because you're going to be building up your values. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use a darker version of this violet, meaning it's not going to be as watered down. And I'm just going to trace. I'm going to put in my eyebrow. And I want this to be darker so I can tell the shape apart from the other stuff that I've just done. Am I going to go into full-blown detail on this tutorial? No. But I do want to give you guys enough to where you guys have an understanding. And don't forget that little walkway. Okay. And I know my values are going to change. I know I'm going to have some shadows in here. And this is kind of where like drawing and painting come hand in hand, right? We already did some of this prep work. Once this is somewhat dry, Okay, I'm going to wipe off my brush. I'm going to smooth this out. I'm going to come in and add a little bit darker values for my shadows. Okay, remember that's going to be the darkest shadow on your face. Also remember your eyelid is a fold of skin, so you don't want a harsh line. I want to bring in these values a bit. And don't worry about how it looks, guys. This is practice. If you guys already knew what you were doing, we wouldn't be doing this. And then here's really the only unfair thing I can think of. Some of you guys are just going to pick up on this really fast and naturally, and other people are going to struggle. Needs to be charged. Okay, so again, we're not trying to make a little masterpiece here, right? We're just drawing. And I'm going to let this dry. And we're going to move on to some other techniques. Okay, so we're gonna let this one go. We're gonna move on. So we need this up to dry. Okay, so that's why I want to attack it early, and then I can show you what we're gonna do afterwards. Okay, so when I talked about mixing opposite colors, I'm gonna take orange. And I'm going to take blue. I'm not going to use the other colors because, quite frankly, they don't work as well as orange and blue does. So all I'm doing is taking some orange and some blue. Okay, so if I put orange down, not a lot of orange, and I put more blue down on top of that orange, we're going to get like a gray color. And what I'll do is I'll pull out just a bit so you guys can see it. And you're going to get this natural gray. And as it dries, you'll see it a little bit more. So that was more blue than orange. So let me hold this up so you guys can see it. And you get a natural gray. If I go the opposite, if I go just a little bit of blue, okay, so look, I'm doing a lighter blue. I'm going to clean off my brush. I'm going to go and put a lot of orange in here. And what I'm going to get now is kind of like this rust brown. And let me drag some of this color out, and you guys can see this rust brown color. Then if I go a lot of blue and a lot of orange, I got to get more orange here. So if I go a lot of blue and a lot of orange, what's going to happen is you're going to get like a dark brown. I need more of that blue. Okay, and this is all really dependent on the amount that you put in. Okay, and you'll see this dark brown that comes out of it. So all colors that are opposites will do this. So here's that brown. Okay. But red and green will make like a dark chocolate brown, like a dark brown. If you add a little bit more red, it'll be more like a mahogany. Yellow and violet make like baby poop brown. Yellow and violet make a horrible brown. But here you go. You got your gray, you got your rust, and you got your dark brown. And that's for mixing orange and blue. So if I need to create like a gray, like a natural gray, I don't want to use black generally. So I'll make a gray with blue and orange, but I make sure I make plenty of it if I need it. When I add black, it is to desaturate and darken something. So I take green and make it into forest green. I make blue and take it into midnight blue. I take violet and I make it into that like dark plum violet. Red turns into crimson. Okay, and you're desaturating it. But if I need to have something that looks more natural, I'm not going to use black at all. I might go in afterwards a little bit for like the pupil. If someone has really dark black eyelashes and eyebrows, I'll go in and do that. Okay, so check your first two. They should be fairly dry. What I'm going to do with the violet one, I'm going to take an ink pen. You got ink pens over there. And what I want to do is I want to put a pupil in my iris. And what you guys are going to see is that watercolor and ink work really, really well together. And then I'm going to take a mixture of blue and violet. And I'm going to do the exact same thing we did with the pencil. Except I'm going to use colors. Anybody tell me why I'm using blue and violet for this? Why would I not use green or yellow? Don't give up. You get full credit. So again, we want to use the same colors that we're painting with. So if I'm painting with violets and I'm painting with blues, okay, so we want to use the exact same techniques we went over with pencil. So I'm going to start putting in my sections with my loops, and I already put my clock face in. And you can see how this is starting to look. I'm going to go in again with that violet. And I'm just going to increase that ring. And I'm going to have those tissues coming out of the iris. And I'm going into the edge of, out of the pupil. And I come in. So now, I can take something like a white pencil, and I can go over this and kind of lighten this area up. So you have that nice little ring. Okay. And this is where I'll take that white ink, and I'm going to add my highlight. Okay. And we're going to do the same thing to the other side, except I'm not going to use black ink. I'm going to use the dark violet. You could use violet, and you could use a little bit of black with it, or you can just keep it all like this, right? And I want to do the same technique that I did on the other side. And again, guys, I don't expect you guys to be great at this. This is why we're doing a tutorial. If you guys were already great at this, we wouldn't be doing a tutorial. All right, so again, I am just mimicking the same techniques I did with the pencil. I'm coming in with this violet to darken in this ring. Okay, so you guys can see how that looks. I'm going to come in here and add a little bit more of these striations. Now, hey, so like Monte, I've been doing this for a long time, right? This is the first time you guys are doing it, so you guys just got to keep that in mind. And even on this, I'm not trying to be great. I'm just trying to show a little bit of a technique. So if you guys want to use any of the white inks, I got some up here for you guys to grab. You can go in and put a highlight in. And we're going to go back to the other eye now. You guys can come up and grab any colored pencils. So whatever colors you use, just grab the colored pencils that correspond. If you guys decide to use these techniques, this should be, I want the white ink here. Okay, so if you guys do something like this for your final, I do have the nicer colored pencils versus these Crayolas. And usually if I do something like this, I'm going through with at least one more round of watercolor. But for this demo, I just want to show you how colored pencil and watercolor kind of work together in ink. Because I'll use ink on this one too. And I'm going to come back in with a little bit of blue. So when I come back with this blue on top of the violet, it's just going to make a blue violet, and then I have the blue watercolor underneath. But I am just trying to get those darker values. Okay, and then I'm just going to go back into my shadows. I'm going to go back to the regular violet. And I'm just going to shade a little bit out of my shadows. I'm going to darken in my eye part. Okay, and then I'm going to come in and do my iris and my pupil. Okay, and I'm going to use the exact same techniques I was just using over there. Okay, and then I also want to put in that shadow. So I'm going to put in that shadow right now. Okay, and what am I missing from this? What's the last thing that I need to get done? So some of these other values here, I would probably come back in with the second coat of watercolor, but if I do that right now, we won't be able to get through the tutorial. So I'm just going to put in some of these shadows with the color pencil. Okay, so all the things that we did with a regular pencil, we are doing with watercolor and color pencil. The watercolor does allow you to get that like flat color down or that color wash underneath. And then you could go back through with color pencils and add the gradations, add in textures, whatever it is that you want to add. So I'm going to come in and again work on this iris. And as you guys can see, the same techniques we use with the pencil we're using with color pencil, and it's just rinse and repeat. Okay, so now I'm going to come back in with my ink. And with my ink, I'm going to add my eyelashes. And then again, just a reminder, do not leave my brushes in the water. It ruins the brushes. The brushes in the water, please. Okay, so I'm going to add, this pen's a little thicker than I wanted, but oh well. So here's my eye. Okay, there's my eyelashes. And then I could go through if I want that, if I wanted the eyebrow to be like black hair, I could go through and do that too. But I just wanted to show you guys really fast something simple that we could mix and match these different mediums. Does this mean you have to use watercolor for your final? Right, this is just an option, okay? So if you guys like it or you like part of it and you want to think about using it for your final, you can. If you don't, that's fine. You guys have crayons, pastels, colored pencils, colored inks. So you guys have options for when you do this, okay? All I want to do is make sure that you guys know your options and you have a little bit of practice. If you want to do something like this, but you're still not sure, you can practice some more. Just let me know and I'll cut you up. I'll cut you up some more papers to practice on. But I just wanted to give you guys a little bit more possibilities and opportunities for completing this assignment. Okay, so I'm going to come around and grade and help. So remember, if you did it, you're going to get that full credit. If you sat there and didn't do anything, you're not going to get any credit for today. Now we're gonna do the next thing, and I'm just gonna show you how to do a drip. I'm gonna talk you through a few other things. So you can use a straw to do something like this, but the straw is not going to be as controllable. And what I want to do is I just want to load an area with paint, or sorry, water. So I'm going to discolor the water, and then I'm going to create a few little lines coming down. And what I want to do is I just really want to load water in this area. And then I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to get that color again. And I'm just going to load and drop the color in. And what's going to happen is, as I lift this, that color is going to travel down that water. And if I tap, it'll keep going. And if I want to, I can push this other side a little bit more. I'm going to add more paint into it. And I'm really just going to load it up. Now, if gravity does not want to help me, I can always do just blow on a little bit. And you'll see that it will go down. If you want, if you want to have a tighter control, you can use a straw, but you got to be pretty even with your pressure on the straw, otherwise you'll get like a starburst. And if anybody wants to see straw technique, I can do that individually. So I'm just going to tap this and get that water going down. Again, you could also use your air and you'll get that. I had a little paint splatter on my paper. I'm going to throw a little water on this. I'm going to take my tissue paper. I'm just going to lift. This won't fully erase, but it will help lift. And things like this happen, and you just kind of let it go. Okay. What I'm going to show you now, the last thing I'm going to show you is how to do a cloud. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put water down. And I'm just going to kind of push it around. And you'll see some areas where the water is a little bit darker with the blue, and I'm just going to go into those areas with the blue. And I'll just let it push around. I'm going to add a little bit more water into this for the sky. And what I'll do is I'll look at some of those areas where that blue is just kind of naturally going. And I'll just add a little bit more blue to it, depending on how blue my sky is going to be. And then I'll come back in with water here. And this is where you use your tissue. So I'm going to take my tissue, and I'm going to lift in those naturally lighter areas. And it's going to give me a cloud shape. So I'm going to put a little bit more blue around it so you guys can see it a little bit easier. And anywhere it kind of naturally is a little bit lighter, I just kind of start taking from that area, because it's going to make the clouds feel a little bit more accurate, a little bit more spontaneous. And again, you just need clean tissue, and you can come in and just lift, and you're going to get your cloud. Now, if you start to get a hard edge, what you can do is you could trace the interior part of the cloud with a little bit of water. and then you take your tissue and lift again, but we want to wait for this to dry. I can't lift it up too much because the water will go everywhere, but you can see how you start having your clouds. Okay, so if I need to create fog, smoke, clouds, I'm just going to use tissue. But again, in the classroom, use the cheap tissue. Don't use the nice tissue that I gave you guys for your noses. So this was it. Okay. So anybody have questions on it? Everyone good? Okay, so I'm going to stop recording again.